Well, let's get started. For those in person and those online, we're so glad that you're here today. We are in our fifth week looking at 1st and 2nd Kings, and today we'll finish the story of Solomon. So over the last couple of weeks, as we have been going along, we looked at the end of David's life, and we began looking at Solomon's rise. Quickly, Solomon consolidates power. He gets rid of perceived and real enemies. We see that after he does this, he gets married to an Egyptian princess, violating one of the early Deuteronomistic commands for those, not to marry those foreign ladies, because what? Eventually their gods will come into play. After that, he is given wisdom, and we see that wisdom becomes kind of part and parcel of remembrance of Solomon. Also, Solomon is very successful. He's very blessed. And today we'll see even more what that looks like. Then we saw that Solomon begins to not only build bureaucracy, so he builds not only a court and has an army, is very successful in that, but he begins to build the temple. And as he builds the temple, he's also building what? A palace. And part of that palace is for him and part of it's for the government, but it is big, it is huge. The temple is big and huge. It is full of gold. It's very beautiful. So one of the things we read here back in 1 Samuel, when the people say to God, give us a king like the other nations, by the time we get to part of today, we're going to look and say, Israel can say in Solomon, not only do we have a king like the other nations, we got a king that surpasses them. Look at what we've done. I mean, he's only our third king, and look how big we are and how successful we are and how wealthy we are. Yet through all of this, there is that continual call of God from David telling his son, Solomon, walk in the ways of God. God reminding him that as well. And then today, last week we had the dedication of the temple, and we had all the prayers that Solomon gives. Solomon tells the people that we must continue to walk in the ways of the Lord. We see all of this, and immediately after it is over, we end with Solomon's prayer of dedication, and we begin in chapter 9. When Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all that Solomon desired to build. Now remember, what was some of the labor that went into it? Conscripted, forced labor. Okay? The Lord appeared to Solomon a second time. And he appeared to him at Gibeon. And the Lord said to him, I have heard your prayer and your plea, which you made before me at the dedication. I have consecrated this house that you build and put my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. So a reminder last week, the reminder was the dedication that Solomon gives is that the house of the Lord will be a house for his name. So that people, wherever they are, can call on God's name and center themselves on the temple, but God will not be contained in the temple. Okay? But he has blessed it as a place for his name, and his eyes and his heart will be there all time. As for you, if you will walk before me. Now notice there's a lot of if conditional statements. If you will walk before me as David your father walked with integrity of heart and uprightness, doing according to all that I've commanded you, and keeping my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised your father David, saying, there shall not fail a successor on the throne of Israel. If, then. So it's a very conditional relationship here. It's a covenant relationship. If you will follow in my ways, then. Go back to Deuteronomy. If you will follow, then there will be blessings. If you don't, there will be what? Consequences. If you turn aside from following me, you, your children, and do not keep my commandments, my statutes that I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, Then I will cut Israel off from the land that I have given them and the house that I have consecrated for my name. I will cast out of my sight, and Israel will become a proverb and a taunt among all peoples. If you turn aside, if you follow other gods, if you worship other gods, then essentially the people go into exile. So remember, we're reading this hindsight. The theological reflection of 1st and 2nd Kings was what? The if happened and the then's already happened. So looking backwards, we're saying Solomon knows good and well what he was supposed to do. The other kings know good and well what they're supposed to do. They know the then. You know, for us, we know if we eat all those donuts over there, then our blood sugar is going to be high. If we do certain things, then consequences will happen. Now, at what point in somebody's life do they think that they're above those things? Ever met somebody? They can get the ifs and the thens, but they don't think it'll ever happen to them? Yeah. And people sometimes that are so far removed from everything else, like a king, can forget the consequences that happen. The house will become a heap of ruins. Everyone passing it will be astonished and will hiss, and they will say, "Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this house?" Then they will say, "Because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of the land of Egypt, and embraced other gods, worshiping them and serving them before the Lord has brought this disaster upon the people." So God, immediately after Solomon has dedicated the temple, essentially legitimizing that this is the one and only place of what? Worship. God comes and says, "You're doing well, but don't turn away." Those if-then statements, powerful statements. You think if God showed up after you dedicated the temple, you would probably what? Take that to heart. At the end of 20 years in which Solomon had built the houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house, King Hiram of Tyre, having supplied Solomon with cedar and cypress, timber and gold, as much as he desired, King Solomon gave to Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. So he's had this relationship that we've already talked about with Hiram of Tyre. He's provided cedar and workers and helped build the thing. As a way of repayment, he gives them some property, essentially, some cities for him to essentially what? Probably collect taxes from, probably conscript labor from. In Galilee, when Hiram came to Tyre to see the cities that Solomon had given him, they did not please him. You know, he got a couple of Campobellas, a couple of Gowensvilles. He didn't get a Spartanburger or Greenville, okay? Therefore he said, "What kind of cities are these that you had given me, my brother?" So they called the land of Cabal to this day. But Hiram had sent to the king 120 talents of gold. Now, one of the things we'll see within these passages is that Solomon is on top. And at this moment in Israel's history, nobody beats Solomon. Everybody is doing what? Paying homage to Solomon, making sure Solomon's happy, not fighting against Solomon. This is the account of the forced labor that King Solomon conscripted to build the house of the Lord and his own house. The Millo and the wall of Jerusalem, Hazar, Megiddo, Gezer. Pharaoh king of Egypt had gone up and captured Gezer and burned it down and killed the Canaanites who lived in the city and had given it as a dowry to his daughter, but Solomon's wife. So Solomon called it Gezer. Just a little, well, you know, this is how they got the property. Lower Beth-horon, Baalath, Tamar in the wilderness within the land, as well as all Solomon's storage cities, the cities of his chariots, the cities of his cavalry, and whatever Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and all the land of dominion. All the people who were left of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, were not of the people of Israel. Their descendants who were still left in the land, whom the Israelites were unable to destroy completely, these Solomon conscripted for slave labor. And so they are to this day. So all of these former enemies of Israel who no longer really, their descendants, he what? Takes as slaves. But of the Israelites, Solomon made no slaves. Now that's curious because if we go back, it didn't sound like that earlier, did it? Conscripted labor was probably a short period of time, but it was still conscripted labor. It wasn't forever. But of the Israelites, Solomon made no slaves. They were the soldiers, they were his officials, his commanders, his captains, his commanders of the charioteer and the cavalry. So we're getting here this huge picture of all that Solomon is over. He's so powerful, he becomes like a pharaoh to what? Have slaves. Not only that, he has chief officers and he has charioteers and captains. There were chief officers who were over Solomon's work, 550, who had the charge of the people who carried on the work. But Pharaoh's daughter went up from the city of David to her own house that Solomon had built for her. Then he built Millo. 3 times a year, Solomon used to offer up burnt offerings and sacrifices of well-being on the altar that he built for the Lord, offering incense for the Lord, so he completed the house. King Solomon built a fleet of ships, which is near Eloth on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. Hiram sent out his servants with the fleet sailors who were familiar with the sea, together with the servants of Solomon. Then he went to Ophir and imported from there 420 talents of gold, which they delivered to Solomon. So just imagine, Solomon is getting richer and richer and richer by the day. And as we'll see in a little bit, gold is so impressive. In a minute we're going to see silver wasn't even anything. That's how much gold they had. So his renown is becoming big. He's becoming not only a king of Israel, but he's becoming a geopolitical important person. Even so that in chapter 10 we meet the Queen of Sheba, which is a place we don't know where it's at. It's a distant place. So I want you to think about this story and another story out of the New Testament. I want you to think if you can see a corollary, New Testament corollary out of this story. Okay? You've got a distant person who hears about this king and wants to come see. When the king of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, fame due to the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great, what does your verse say? Caravan. Just imagine, all of these different people carrying stuff, camels carrying stuff, oxen carrying stuff, just one big old bushel of things after another, treasures. A variety caravan with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. Now imagine Israel is reading this after they've been exiled. Maybe when they've come back to the land and the temple's not rebuilt. And their memory is of a time when what? The nations were coming and what? Paying homage to their king. Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. When the queen of Sheba had observed all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, the attendance of his servants, the clothes, their clothing, his valets, his burnt offering that he offered at the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. What does your translation say?
She was overwhelmed.
She was overwhelmed. And you just imagine in some movie a woman almost fainting. That's how impressive she is to this distant queen. I mean, if you got to remember somebody, this is a good memory of somebody. There was nothing she could ask that he couldn't give an answer for. Remember, God has blessed him with what? Discernment and wisdom. What was it for, though? For justice and righteousness. So the king said so she said to the king, the report was true that I heard in my own land of your accomplishments, of your wisdom. But I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes had seen it. Not half had been told me. Your wisdom and prosperity far surpass the report that I have heard. Happy are your wives. Happy are your servants who continually attend you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you king to what? Execute justice and righteousness. And she says this, and it's almost just said. It's not anything necessarily that she's seen. She doesn't report seeing him doing anything about justice and righteousness. She knows what kings are supposed to be doing. And it's almost an offhand remark. We don't even know if within the narrative that Solomon even recognizes what she said. But she says it, and we as the audience hear, you know what? So far, we've not seen him doing a whole lot of executing of justice and righteousness. It's been more about what? Accumulation of what? Fame and stuff and wealth. Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, a great quantity of spices, precious stones. Never again did spice come in such quantities, that which the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. So just imagine some old movie where you've got this big caravan of stuff coming in and people are seeing things from a distant land they've never seen before. Now, in your translations, what did it say about the spices? Anybody have frankincense in there? Some translations it'll use frankincense and gold. Far off person coming to see a king with spices and gold. Any story come to mind? Jane, what story comes to mind? Yeah. You know, in the Magi who come to see Jesus are from where? East. A faraway place, they don't even give it a location. They've heard about what? They've seen through the stars that there's what? A king coming. And they come to what? Bring gold and spices, frankincense and myrrh. You know, when Jewish Christian readers of the early church were reading the story of Jesus, they would have recognized this story of the Queen of Sheba. And they would recognize that in it, a Gentile, a foreigner, understands there's something unique about this king in Israel. And we as followers of Jesus know who is the true king? Jesus. And the story of the Magi is a story similar here where, unlike the people of Israel here, they knew who Solomon was. But in that story, it is those on the outside who see who the real king is. And it doesn't come to a palace, doesn't come to a big court with lots of officials. Actually, they have to get away from the official to get there. So just those kind of things you should kind of keep in the back of your mind as we will compare and contrast Solomon in a little bit with Jesus. So we transition from the story of Sheba to a story of more of his royal wealth. How big and great Solomon was. Moreover, the fleet of Hiram, which carried gold from Ophir, brought from Ophir a great quantity of algum wood and precious stones. From the algum wood, the king made supports for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, lyres also and harps for the singers. No such alone wood has come or been since to this day. Meanwhile, King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba every desire that she expressed, as well as he gave her out of Solomon's royal bounty. Then she returned to her own land with her servants. The weight of the gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold, besides that which came from the traders and from the businesses and the merchants and from all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the land. People are just bringing Solomon what? treasure. The king made 200 large shields of beaten gold, 600 shekels of gold, weight in each large shield. He made 300 shields of beaten gold, 3 minas of gold went into each shield, and the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. So in that palace, just imagine walking in and seeing hung up all of these shields of gold. They would have been ordained with beautiful images of probably flowers and things like that. Just imagine walking in and seeing all of this gold. The king also made a great ivory throne and overlaid it with finest gold. Now, we don't see ivory much anymore, do we? But imagine a throne made of ivory, overlaid with gold. You think maybe he's going a little overboard? A little bit. The throne had 6 steps. The top of the throne was rounded in the back, and on each side of the seat were armrests with 2 lions standing beside the armrest, while 12 lions were standing, one on each end of the step of the 6 steps. Nothing like it has ever been made in any kingdom. All of King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. None were silver. It was not considered as anything in the days of Solomon. Now, I'll be honest with you. I'd rather have gold over the silver. I'll take silver. But in Solomon's day, the writer of 1 Kings is essentially saying, silver was nothing. It was all gold, baby. We didn't have to worry about silver. For the king had a fleet of ships of Tarshish at the sea, at the fleet of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the fleet of the ships of Tarshish used to come bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. I want you to think about this. In Solomon's day, they had a fleet of ships going out on the seas. For the rest of Israel's history, what do they not have? They don't have a navy. Only in Solomon's day did Israel have a navy. They can fish, and that's about it. So in Solomon's day, they were only going around where they normally are. They were going out and bringing all of this exotic treasure back. Now, the memory of Solomon is one of what? Opulence. We had it all. Thus King Solomon excelled in all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. The whole earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his mind. Every one of them brought a present, objects of silver, of gold, garments, weaponry, spice, horses, and mules, so much year by year. You can only imagine Solomon getting up every morning, having to hold court, and people bringing presents all day. Rough life. Put the gold over here, put the spices over here. Solomon gathered together chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he stationed in the chariot cities with the king in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedars as numerous as the sycamores. Solomon's import of horses was from Egypt and Kue, and the king's traders received them from Kue at a price. A chariot could be imported from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. So through all the king's traders, they were exported to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Aram. Everyone is getting something from Solomon because Solomon is so blessed. He is in charge. He's got it all. So we're left with this impression at the end of chapter 10 of how big, how important Solomon was. It would have been nice if that's how he was remembered. But it's not. It's because he couldn't do the if-then. If-then. King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh. Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Zidonian, Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the Israelites, you shall not enter into marriage with them, neither they with you, for they will surely incline your heart to follow their gods. So Solomon knows the if. It's in Deuteronomy. One thing David didn't do was this. David had wives. He had concubines, not near as many as his son. But his heart always stayed what? With God. He did some terrible things. But he never led himself nor the people to what? Idolatry. It's number one on the Ten Commandments. It's the first one.
Jeremiah,
Yeah.
why did they bring apes and baboons?
Are we going backwards, huh? Because it's exotic. You know,
Did they eat them? Or?
no, they were just there to show that, I mean, if you're that wealthy, just think about this.
Apes and baboons?
You know,
They didn't have them.
yeah, they didn't have them. It was a sign of privilege. You know, even in before the French Revolution, some of the French monarchs had all kinds of crazy animals in their court. They might have had a giraffe. There are no giraffes in Paris. They bring them in. Yeah,
And I have a question.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, they went out and they came back every 3 years. Where did they go get these treasures? Did they steal it? Did they?
Probably. That's the inclination, is they went out and
And just,
pill it. Well, either they traded or they took. The reality is that doesn't happen anymore. So this is what nations do, though. You know, they wanted to be a great nation like the other kings. They got the perfect king in Solomon to be just like the other nations who go out and what? Pillage, plunder, take. To what? Expand their region, their influence. To have other people what? Bring them riches. Tribute. It doesn't happen anymore after Solomon. This is the peak. And we would think, okay, if this was the peak, and we're writing this and listening to this in exile, what happened? How did it get so bad that only at the beginning of our history was there a peak in terms of the monarchy? Why has it been so bad afterwards? Well, you know what? The if-then statement. And it goes here because we're going to see that he couldn't keep the if, so the then, that God has a plan to just tear it all apart.
How do you take care of all those wives?
I'm going to pause our thing right here for a second. Continuing on. You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither stay with you, for you will surely incline your heart to follow their gods. Solomon clung to these in love. Now we've been told that David's heart was after who? After God. So far we've seen that his heart's kind of divided. Where does his heart normally go to?
To the women.
Well, and the women do what for Solomon? It's for him.
How old was Solomon at this point?
Well, he reigns for 40 years. He probably came in as a young man. So I don't know exactly how old he was. But we have here in verse 4, for when Solomon was old, unlike his father who was old, could only get warmed by a woman, Solomon still what? His wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. So Solomon followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not completely follow the Lord as his father had done. He starts to what? Worship other gods. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, for Molech, the abomination of the Amorites, and on the mountains east of Jerusalem. He did all the same for his foreign wives who offered incense and sacrifice to their gods. The same man who built what? The temple in Jerusalem is building shrines and other temples for his wives to worship in his own land.
Doesn't sound like he was so wise when it came to that, does it?
No. So one of the things we have about 1 Kings is 1 Kings gives us an awareness is you can be successful and still be a failure.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who appeared to him twice, who had commanded him concerning this matter, that he should not follow other gods, but he did not observe what the Lord commanded. Throughout the rest of 1 and 2 Kings, throughout the rest of the prophets, the main indictment God gives to Israel is they what? They put something else in the place of God. Idolatry. Now we might not have shrines and other things, but idols are still real today. There are still things that turn our hearts to other things. Where we say we love God with all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our soul, all of our strength in one breath, and then go out and worship something else. Solomon is doing this. The Lord is upset. It reminds us, the Lord spoke to Solomon 2 times. And the second time it was pretty clear, if you do this, then this will happen. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, Since this has been your mind, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I've commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of your father David, I will not do it for your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. I will not have her tear away the entire kingdom. I'll give to you one tribe for your son, and for the sake of David and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I've chosen. So God comes to Solomon and essentially says, listen, you have done what I've told you not to do. When you die, I'm going to tear the kingdom apart. And your son will only keep a small portion of what you had. God will still remain faithful to his promise to David that there will always be what? A lineage in your name. But the whole kingdom won't be yours. And hear this, the image here, I will tear the kingdom, because it comes back, this image of tearing. Now, if you're Solomon and you hear this, what's your personality change going to be? I'm going to be suspicious of everybody. The Lord raised up adversaries against Solomon. So we're going to read 3 adversaries that happen, and two of them are foreigners, and one is someone inside the kingdom. And it's interesting, we get these stories of these 2 on the outside, but not much else about, only that they really hate Solomon. And part of the reason they hate Solomon is because of what happened to them in their past. And one of the things I love about this is that God somehow sympathizes with these outsiders because of how they've been treated, which is interesting. The Lord raised up adversary against Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the royal house of Edom. For when David was in Edom and Joab, the commander of the army, went up to bury the dead, he killed every male in Edom. For Joab and all Israel remained there 6 months until he had eliminated every male in Edom. What does that story remind you of? Reminds you of Pharaoh, doesn't it? Trying to get rid of all the what? Male children. It's interesting how oftentimes when God has told God's people, don't be like what? Pharaoh, I rescue you out of Egypt, how often they become the very thing that they remember as their enemy. Joab did the very same thing that God's people had happened to them. But Hadad fled to what? Egypt. Where did Moses go? Moses was in Egypt when it happened, with some Edomites who were servants of his father. He was a young boy at the time. They set out from Midian and came to Paran, and they took people with them from Paran and came to Egypt to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave him a house, assigned him an allowance of food, and gave him land. Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him his sister-in-law for a wife, the sister of Queen Tahpenes. The sister of Tahpenes gave birth by him the son Genubath. Those are beautiful names if y'all have grandchildren coming out, you know. Whom Telephenes weaned into Pharaoh's house. Genubath was in Pharaoh's house among the children of Pharaoh. And when Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his ancestors and that Joab, the commander of the army, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart." What? Let me go. So there's echoes of the story here of an outsider, in many ways echoing the story of Israel, that I may go to my own country. But Pharaoh said to him, "What do you lack with me that you now seek to go to your own country?" And he said, "No, let me go." We don't know much else right here about him. God raised up another adversary against Solomon, Rezon, son of Eldad, who had fled from his master, King Hadadezar of Zobah. He gathered followers around him and became leader of a marauding band after the slaughter by David. They went to Damascus, settled there, and made him king in Damascus. He was an adversary of Israel all the days of Solomon, making trouble as Hadad did. He despised Israel and reigned over Aram. So, two people at some point in Solomon's reign were his adversaries. Always what? Causing problems. Now we think maybe, like we'll see later in Israel's history, God uses the outside nations to sometimes bring judgment on God's people, like Babylon or Assyria. But notice, it's not an outsider, it becomes an insider that God uses to bring problem for Solomon. Jeroboam, son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zadar, a servant of Solomon, whose mother was named Zahorah, a widow, rebelled against the king. The following was the reason he rebelled against the king. Solomon built Millo and closed up the gap in the wall of the city of his father David. The man Jeroboam was very able, and when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he gave him charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. About that time, when Jeroboam was leaving Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him on the road. So we get this prophet who is coming from Shiloh. We don't know anything about him, but he's just on the road one day. And he sees Jeroboam, and he has clothed himself with new garment. So let's just imagine he looks weird. Let's just imagine that. This new garment, he's clothed weirdly, he's probably acting weirdly, because all the prophets are little oddballs, as we'll read. The two of them were alone in the open country when Ahijah laid hold of the new garment he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. So Jeroboam is wearing this new garment, 12 pieces. He's got this crazy looking man out here on the road. He's clothed with the new garment. He tears his own garment. Ahijah tears his garment into 12 pieces. He then said to Jeroboam, "Take for yourself 10 pieces." So this man tears his own clothes off, gives 10 pieces to Jeroboam. "Take for yourself 10, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, see, I'm about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon and will give you 10 tribes. Now, is Jeroboam somebody important? No. Is he a wealthy person? No. He's a what? He's a commoner like David was. One tribe will remain his for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem and the city I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. This is because he has forsaken me, worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, Milcom, the god of the Amorites, and has not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, keeping my statutes and my ordinances as his father David did. Nevertheless, I will not forsake the whole kingdom away from him, but will make him ruler all the days of his life, for the sake of my servant David, whom I chose and did keep my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom away from his son and give it to you. That is the 10 tribes. Yet to his son I give 1 tribe, so that my servant David always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen to put my name. I will take you, and you shall reign over all your soul desires. You shall be king over Israel. If you will listen to all that I command you, again, if-then statements, walk in my ways and do what is right by my sight, by keeping my statutes, my commandments, as David my servant did, then I will be with you. And you will build an adoring house as I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. For this reason I will punish the descendants of David, but not forever. Solomon sought before to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam promptly fled to Egypt, to King Shishka of Egypt, and remained in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So as Solomon is kind of waning in his last years, God chooses another to be king over the 10 tribes in the north. And the southern kingdom will be a small kingdom in the south, centered around Jerusalem. That's 11 tribes. Where's the other one? Levites. Levites don't own land. So the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom will happen after what? Solomon's death. Now, can you imagine being a part of Solomon's great success? Thinking that this wouldn't last forever. Not only that, you're about to have essentially a civil war. Not only that, successor kings in the north and successor kings in the south are going to follow the same pattern of what? Of Solomon. Because so often they're what? They're willing to compromise the very thing that God has asked them not to do. Put anything else before Him. They will worship other gods. It's interesting, by the time we get to the prophet Jeremiah and others longer in the history of the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel, look at archaeology during that period. They had all sorts of things throughout their history that they continued to practice worship of other gods. Whether it was small statues that they would have had of Asherah, a goddess figure. It's only after the history is completed and the hindsight looks backwards that Israel decides right then and there, if they're going to start again, they can't do this again. So by the time you get to the book of Nehemiah and Ezra and Nehemiah, as you get to that intertestamental period, it's only then that they really become very strict in keeping faithful witness for everyone to be what? What we would consider monotheistic. No other gods. Before that, before exile, people were inclined to worship other gods so very often. Oftentimes it was because they wanted to be like the other kingdoms. But a lot of times it was because they couldn't be committed. So often the prophets use images of adultery as a way of idolatry is like adultery. But for us today, as we hear this and we think about this, how oftentimes are we seduced like Solomon to worship things that are not God? It's more often than most of us would think, and it's not even necessarily bad things. It's things we put our trust in that are not God. We put our loyalty or allegiance to that are not God. Money. It even says, in God we trust. There's so many things, it can be even sports. It could be so many things that we put our faith and loyalty in that at the end of the day, unlike God, will not give anything back to us. Those gods will not give anything back to what? Solomon. The only thing it gives is what? Destruction. Let me close this in a word of prayer. We will pick up next week. Well, let me finish verses 41 and 40 through 43. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, all that he did, as well as his wisdom, they are not written in the books, are they not written in the books of the acts of Solomon? So here we have a book named that we don't have anymore. One of the things the writer of 1 Kings is reminding us is 1 Kings is only telling a particular narrative. And essentially says, if you want to learn more about Solomon, go read this book. We're going to tell you why it didn't work out. As a theological perspective that goes through it, we talked about that deuteromistic perspective. It really is that if we had done better, then things wouldn't have been like they are. But they didn't. So this lost book of Solomon, we don't have anything at. At that time, Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over Israel for 40 years. Solomon slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of the father David. And his son, Rehoboam, succeeded him. So next week we will talk about how the kingdom becomes divided. We'll talk about Jeroboam's sin. We'll talk about all the things that happen. And we'll see a pattern that continues over and over. I love the book of Judges because the book of Judges is pattern oriented. The pattern's not necessarily stated in the same way in 1st and 2nd Samuel or 1st and 2nd Kings, but there is a pattern. God shows up, God chooses somebody to lead, and what? The people what? Either come back, but so oftentimes in the 1st and 2nd Kings, they're led away. So let's pray, and y'all make sure to get some more goodies before you leave. Some of y'all, your sugar high's gone down, I can tell. Get a pick-me-up before you go to lunch. Gracious God, we just thank you so much. We thank you for the way that you love us, that you care for us, that you gathered us together to study your word. God, as we continue to go deeper into your word, we see how complicated life can be. Not just the world of our day, but the world of history, the world of God's people, and how universal those things really are. God, sometimes the measures that we have for success are not really your measure for success. As grand and big as Solomon's kingdom was, he missed the main essential thing, loving you with all of his heart, all of his mind, and all of his strength. God, we can gain the whole world and lose our soul. Help us to be followers of Jesus that looks for a different way, an alternative way of measuring success. Not through the stuff that we have or the accomplishments we do, but by the way that we love you by loving others as ourselves. Be with us this week, bring us back together, and help us continue to focus on you through your word. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.